What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Sports Nerds podcast here on the 515 Podcast Network. My name is Brock Bierman, alongside with my boy Dawson Livingston. And I'm not going to lie, Dawson, this week one for an NFL was honestly pretty entertaining. I was expecting a lot of the teams that I may have expected to win to kind of just dominate week one for some reason. And most of them did end up winning their first game, but some of them were in some battles, and some of them actually got upset in week one. So I would give this week one a 9 out of 10 for sure on the rating for the quality of games that we got this week.
Oh, for sure. Especially the first two games of the season were great games to watch. I mean, we're talking about Ravens Chiefs, obviously, and then Packers Eagles. Both those games were great. And then you had other games throughout the day that were kind of entertaining. The Steelers beating the Falcons without scoring a touchdown was kind of funny. The Cardinals were dominating the Bills in the second quarter, up 17-3 at one point. The Bears win a game when Caleb Williams throws for less than 100 yards. There were just a lot of good storylines this week, which I think made for one of the better week ones that I think we've had in a while.
I can't agree more. And I think this is the second year in a row where Arizona blew a week one lead heading into the fourth quarter, which is good to know that they're still consistently bad at keeping leads. But nothing really to talk about that game outside of the fact that Arizona blew it and that Marvin Harrison, I think, only had one reception the entire game. Not going to push the panic button too early on that, but that is kind of what week one is, looking at these games, recapping them, and kind of overreacting on things, because you can look at some of these scores and be like, oh, this team is going to be really good compared to maybe what you and I said heading into this year. And then there's also teams where it's like, oh, we were right, and these teams might not be as good as people may think. But I guess we might as well just start recapping with the first game of the year with the Chiefs and the Ravens, and not necessarily a dominating performance by the Chiefs whatsoever. The Ravens kind of snuck back in there in the fourth quarter, and they were a toe away from tying the game. Lively, I think that's who had it, right?
Likely.
Sorry, basketball. When we get into our graphic of players of the week later on, we'll talk about our story that we had before the show and what we had to adjust because I made a basketball and football mistake, and we'll get into that later. But Likely had basically one toe, maybe a couple more toes out of bounds on the final play of the fourth quarter against the Chiefs, which resulted in it being called incomplete, and the Chiefs ending up getting that week one win. What were your thoughts on this game? Anything stick out to you? Lamar, obviously doing Lamar things, had 122 yards, I think, rushing, which is pretty impressive for, even though we're kind of used to seeing him getting those 100-yard games as a quarterback on the ground. But Mahomes, only one touchdown, one interception as well, but still had 291 yards. So not a terrible game whatsoever. But what were your thoughts on this game, especially being that you are a Chiefs fan?
Yeah, game was definitely close as we all thought it would be going into it. I just wanted to point out, I don't know if you saw, but the Milwaukee Bucks Twitter was trolling with the Ravens, and they put a tweet out right after the game. It's a game of inches, and then the shoe emoji referencing Durant's buzzer beater from, 3 years ago now?
Yep.
That would have beat the Bucks in the semifinals, and who knows, Nets would have probably made the finals that year. Regardless, I just thought that was kind of funny before I really deep dive into this game. Ravens played really well, dominated time of possession. They had some unforced errors. They had a couple roughing the passers that, weren't necessary. Derrick Henry, although he had a touchdown, couldn't really get going. He had, 13 carries or 14 carries. I'm pulling it up. 13 carries for 46 yards. Did have the touchdown. He didn't really get going on the ground. Lamar had a great game on the ground. But Ravens are super dependent on their backup tight end, Isaiah Likely, who ended the game with 9 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown. Could have been 2 touchdowns had he had one size smaller shoe. Talking about the Chiefs now. Oh, man. I think Kansas City has found their Tyreek Hill replacement. Xavier Worthy touched the ball 3 times in this game, 2 of which were touchdowns. Both over, I believe, 20 plus yards. I know the run was over 20. I think the pass was over 30, 35, something like that.
I think it was a
Um,
33-yard reception.
yeah. I think having Worthy in this offense is only going to open up things for Rice more, Kelsey more. And that they didn't even have another one of their top 3 receivers in Marquise Brown playing in this game. So I think that goes to show that Kansas City's clicking on all cylinders right now. I really like what Kansas City's going. It got really, like you said, it got really scary at the end. But overall, I think it was a great win for Kansas City.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows? Rashee Rice played really well. Who knows how long he's going to play this year? I mean, it seems like there's going to be a situation at some point that he probably will get suspended due to the offseason stuff. I don't know. Like, do you know anything about that?
So he has his trial date set for, I believe, June of next year. And so
Okay,
the
so he might
NFL
be
can't
good
really
this
they can't really suspend him up until that point. So he's most likely, I mean, I say this as a Chiefs fan, I'm going to knock on wood, most likely won't get suspended for this year. It will be next year, where you probably get a 4 to probably 6 game suspension of what's the detrimental conduct to the team or something like that. That's how they'll word it. But yeah, he had a great game. 7 catches for 103 yards, longest catch 33 yards. Yeah, he had a great game for Kansas City.
And I was super excited to watch what the Ravens would do with Henry as their star running back this year. And honestly, half of their carries, maybe even over half of that, I don't know if it was great game plan by the Chiefs or just the Ravens offensive line not executing as well. But it seemed like Derrick Henry would get into a big pile of people and just, he would gain some yards, but not yardage that was necessarily worth calling that play for.
Right, and I'll give credit to Steve Spagnuolo and Chris Jones and their game plan of stopping Derrick Henry. That was great. Holding Derrick Henry to under 50 yards, I think you're going to take that every day of the week, regardless of if he got the touchdown. I think what Kansas City needs to worry about, though, is they let Lamar scramble for 16 times, 122 yards. I mean, you got to limit that. He was averaging almost 8 yards a carry on that, which Lamar's one of the most electrifying players in the league, so you can live with some of them. But him passing for over 270 and rushing for another 120, you just can't have that if you're Kansas City. If it wasn't for some unforced errors by Baltimore, who knows? Maybe we're talking that Baltimore may have won this game 28-27. But I think overall, what a way to start the season. What a way to start the year for the NFL.
Hypothetical situation, if you're the coach and that play wasn't necessarily called incomplete and it was a touchdown, you going for 2? You trying to just go for it, get it over with, or you going to overtime?
Oh, yeah. I remember watching the game. After they had scored that touchdown with Likely, they panned straight to Harbaugh, and Harbaugh was holding up the 2 fingers. So they were going for 2. They were going to win or lose that game regardless. Obviously, we'll never end up knowing what happens on that 2-point conversion because we didn't get to that point. But overall, I mean, dude, I don't think you could have asked for a better opening night game than this one.
Yeah, I completely agree. Real quick before we get into the rest of the games from this week, we're going to do a new segment where we kind of give out our players of the week for players that perform or overperform their expectations and just overall great performances that we want to highlight. Dawson's up first, and I mean, he made a great pick with Jordan Mason. Real quick before I let Dawson kind of give his reasoning why, before we started our show, I realized I actually put his name as Frank Mason, which is a former Kansas basketball player, which I don't know why I was confusing him with a former basketball player that hasn't played at Kansas in almost 10 years. But Jordan Mason, great game last night versus the Jets. I'll let you basically give your reasoning why you picked him as your player of the week.
Yeah, I think you can make this argument with any running back under the Kyle Shanahan system that if they're given opportunities, they're gonna thrive. I mean, touched the ball 28 times on the ground, 150 yards almost, had the touchdown, really dominated the time of possession for San Francisco, which I believe is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, why San Francisco won this game in, wouldn't say dominating fashion, but this was a 3-score game in the fourth quarter. So some could say that. The There were other great performances that I'm sure we'll touch on later this episode. Like I was thinking about picking Saquon. His performance over the Packers on Friday was really good. Um, Even a guy like Chris Boswell who nailed 6 field goals in the win for the Steelers,
It's funny you
or
should
even
mention that.
oh man,
Chris Boswell, and it says your name on the graphic. I'll change that when we post that on social media. But
Mhm.
my player of the week is actually Chris Boswell for the 6-for-6 field goals. All the points the Steelers needed to get the win over the Falcons, including 3 from 50-plus yards. So Chris Boswell is my player of the week, especially because without him, they don't win that game. So,
No.
but yeah, there was some really good running back performances this week. Saquon had a really good game. Saquon fantasy owners were having a field day Friday night. It was kind of great to see Saquon kind of do what Saquon, at least what we were used to seeing Saquon do. Over the last couple of years, the Giants have just kind of been a weird organization where it's like he's a star player, but they're not necessarily giving him maybe the praise that he probably deserves. So seeing him perform well in Philadelphia, which I think Philadelphia was such a great place for him to go. Honestly, he fits so well with that team. Really good performance from him week 1, but the game was close. 34-29 was the final score of that Eagles-Packers game, but no one's really talking about the outcome of that game. A lot of people are focusing on the injury, of course, of Jordan Love. Dawson, you've kind of been hyping up the Packers all year. This is a big deal. This is a big deal, honestly. Week 1, and he's going to be back at some point this year, but we don't know when exactly. I mean, I thought it was just a minor injury, and then I saw, Twitter slows down the videos as much as possible, and then a close-up of where everybody thinks the injury is, and you see that knee pop, and you go, ooh, that might be even worse than a couple weeks. So we'll see how long he's actually out. But hey, the Packers were in it still. So, and does this injury change your outlook for the Packers season at all?
It's tough because I still really like what Green Bay did on Friday. I know Jordan Love didn't have like the greatest game. His QBR was only 20, which when looking at QBR, 50 is an average game. I don't know. You can take that with a grain of salt, but that's just what the stats said on Jordan Love's performance. I think the good news is I don't think the Packers are going to put him on IR. If they would have, he would have at least missed 4 weeks. But at the same time, it's concerning as someone who picked the Packers to make the Super Bowl because the last thing you want to do is rush your quarterback back from an injury, and he's just not the same out there. So I hope Green Bay takes like the right precautions with this because I think the Packers can do something really special. I think Jaden Reed could have easily been my player of the week this week. I forgot to mention him earlier, but he had 4 receptions for 140 yards and a touchdown, and then had the 1 carry for 30 yards and a touchdown. Like, I really like what Green Bay does on offense a lot, and we didn't even get to see really like Josh Jacobs going like that crazy. With that being said, I'm not hopping off the Green Bay bandwagon quite yet. I gotta see now if they're when Jordan Love comes back, if they're sitting at 0-4 and 1-3, then we'll talk then. But I still like what Green Bay's got going on right now.
I'm not gonna lie. If I'm them, I'd start shopping to see what you can get for a backup quarterback right now. Because Malik Willis, I know he had to throw deep balls anyways. But I don't know. He's not.
Maybe call up a guy like Ryan Tannehill who's sitting out there in free agency,
like
or
JMO. You got a Colts team up next that is not necessarily a cakewalk. I mean, they showed that versus the Colts last Sunday, and then you got at the Titans and then versus Minnesota. So if he's out for those 3 weeks, there's a good chance you only win one of those games. And if you lose all 3 and you're going at LA, if he's not back then, they're going to be 0-5 potentially when they're going up against the Cardinals. And I think they could beat the Cardinals without Love, but that's a great game for Love to come back if he's healthy, of course. But if you're 0-5, that's it might be over for Green Bay.
Yeah, it's certainly not looking good. I still feel confident in their ability. Like, they're going to play the Colts tough this week. I think they're going to beat the Titans, even though that's a road game. And then that game against Minnesota on the 29th, I still feel like they can win, even though Minnesota played fairly well against the. Now, say take that with a grain of salt. They did play the New York Giants, who aren't world beaters by any means. I think Daniel Jones has more touchdowns to the opposing team than his own team since signing that contract. But yeah, definitely as someone who picked the Packers to make the Super Bowl, that was not good to see.
Yeah. As we are live here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, leave us a comment on who you or give us an overreaction that you may actually believe heading into week 2, because I feel like there's a couple of reactions that people can have that may be a little bit of an overreaction, but I think they're worth talking about. One of those, of course, is the Cincinnati Bengals dropping the ball against a team a lot of people thought would be at the bottom of the league. The New England Patriots. Final score was 16-10. Joe Burrow, no touchdowns. Stevenson for the Patriots did really well, 120 yards. I think he had a touchdown as well. This game was honestly just ugly to watch in general. It wasn't, if you're looking for a lot of scoring, high power offenses, this is not a game for you, which is funny because a lot of people have been hyping up the Bengals year after year because of their offense. And here they go, only putting up 10 points, only scoring in the second half as well, versus a Patriot team that no one was expecting to even be in this game. They didn't even start their first-round quarterback draft pick that they spent on this offseason, which that's not an issue. I think they've made it clear that they don't want to force Drake May into a difficult situation year one, because that could be detrimental to his potential. So what is your reaction? Is it, I mean, we've kind of both mentioned that we think that Cincinnati's kind of something's fishy going on there. Is it time already after week 1 for Bengals fans to panic, or is this just kind of a fluky loss for the Cincinnati?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know. I was pulling up Joe Burrow's passing chart because I saw the stat out there. He got pressured the third fewest times in his career, but his average depth of pass, I think, was the lowest of his career. I mean, he only had 60 yards in the air, didn't have a passing touchdown. Bengals just didn't look good out there. Now, granted, they were missing their second wide receiver in T. Higgins. He was out this game. And Jamar was coming back from his contract holdout, which still, as we're recording this, is not resolved. But Bengals just had too many self-inflicted wounds throughout this game. Their offense didn't look great at all. I mean, I don't know. If you're a Bengals fan, obviously it's week 1. A lot of things can happen from here on out. But man, is this just this gotta hurt for all Bengals fans out there. And I say that as I have one of my professors at Iowa who is a diehard Cincinnati Bengals fan who walked into class yesterday just with the most defeated look on his face as they lost to the Patriots. Oh man.
You know who they were missing?
Let's hear it. Joe Mixon?
They were missing Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon had a really good game on Sunday versus the Colts, his first game as a Houston Texan. 30 carries for 159 yards and a tutty, and a close win against the Texans. Going back to the Bengals, though, nothing really stood out to them as, at least to me, on their offense as being really good. Only 70 yards on the ground versus Joe Mixon, who had 160 almost by himself in his game with the Texans. You mentioned T. Higgins being out, and they'll get him back. But at some point, I feel like T. Higgins might be looking for somewhere else because of their cap situation. So they might as well get used to this kind of look on the offensive side, because this might be the future of the Bengals.
Right, and there's the stat out there. Outside of the quarterback position, the Bengals have never extended. I know this only applies to Jamar Chase, but you'll understand the principle I'm saying. Yep. They've never extended a first-round pick with 2 years left on his deal. And I know that doesn't apply to T. Higgins, but I think you can see with Higgins being on the franchise tag this year. I think it shows the Bengals are reluctant to pay their guys sometimes, and I think that is ultimately going to hurt them this season.
There's a reason they haven't won a Super Bowl.
Right. They've made a couple. That one year they played the Rams, I mean, they were everyone's Cinderella team. And Chase was playing well, and Higgins was playing well, and Burrow was playing out of his mind. But now all those contracts that all those guys you are on rookie contracts, now they're all Burrow's making $55 million. T. Higgins is on a fully guaranteed $20 million contract. Jamar Chase is going to be expecting north of 34, 35 million this year. You lose a guy like Joe Mixon. Like, all these dudes are coming forth right now for Cincinnati, and it really showed on Sunday when they weren't able to run the ball or really pass the ball anyway with only 164 yards.
Oh, the Patriot defense actually did really well.
Oh, yeah.
Which was kind of shocking. I'm not saying this is actually, in my opinion, more of the Bengals struggling to play than the Patriots actually maybe being a Cinderella team this year. I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're tied right now for the lead in their division after week 1, which I can tell you probably nobody except for Patriot fans who have wishful thinking thought was going to happen. So credit to them. And you've talked a couple times about the contracts with Jamar Chase, and we'll see if he actually gets that contract. If they don't, good Lord, that franchise is going to shoot themselves in the foot if they don't give this guy the bag, because he honestly could be the decision on whether or not Joe Burrow will actually be really good in Cincinnati or not, or if he'll just be known as the person that made one good Super Bowl run, and then outside of that, he hasn't really done anything. Injuries also hurt him a little bit, but another person that we've talked a lot about contracts with, and this news came out before any of the games started. A lot of news came out before any of the games started. Shout out Kendrick Lamar being announced as the Super Bowl halftime show performer. I'm actually really excited for that one. He has the opportunity to do one of the greatest things in all of music of all time by ending a certain person's career. But we'll see if that actually happens, because, he's performing on national TV. But I think the biggest news coming out of the NFL before any of the games started on Sunday was Dak Prescott getting his extension with the Dallas Cowboys. I did not see this coming. I don't know if you did. It was announced, and I was like, this has got to be fake. There's no way that Dallas really did this, because all signs pointed to this just kind of being his last year, and then maybe they'll extend him. So, and we were talking about, is this his last year? What were your reactions to this? Because I was shocked. I'm assuming you were shocked too, because we were both kind of looking at this as potentially being the last year for the Dak Prescott era.
Yeah, I certainly didn't think this deal was going to happen. Not like literally 2 hours before the season started. So that was kind of cool to see. Here's some info on the contract. I don't know if you've looked. So this year, his cap hit stays the same at $43 million. But next year, that's when it's going to hurt the Cowboys a lot. His cap hit for next year is $89 million.
Oh, good Lord.
The following year, it's $68 million.
He's second
62
paid quarterback, right? Second
I think he's the highest. I think he's the highest.
So well, he beats Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, for guaranteed money, he does. Just okay. Prescott's total guaranteed is $231 million. He gets $129 million guaranteed at signing, and then gets an $80 million signing bonus. So, yeah. And the Cowboys, if they were to cut him even after the second year of the contract, still incur $62 million in dead cap. So, I mean, you had to do this if you were Dallas. You couldn't take the risk on him just flat out leaving next year, because then you're in a really tough pickle where you got talented players like CeeDee Lamb, and you got guys like Micah Parsons who need to get paid, and Trayvon Diggs. But if you lose your star quarterback, I mean, we've seen teams when they don't have their quarterbacks, they just absolutely plummet. So I think locking up Dak Prescott, while he isn't necessarily a top 5 quarterback in the league, I think you can easily argue he's a top 10 quarterback. And for sure, last year, he was easily a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. And he had a decent performance for week 1 Cowboys kind of just dominated the Browns 33-17. I think he had 179 yards and a touchdown. The rushing game, I'm not too concerned yet, but nobody really stood out on that. I think Zeke was the highest rusher on their stat line. Their defense, holy crap, dominated the Browns. And I'm trying to debate if it's the Browns, more of the Browns offense being just terrible, and we're going to get into that, or is the Dallas defense the one of, if not the best, depending on who you argue with, defenses in the league?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, we talked about it earlier, but we don't know what's going on with Cleveland or Deshaun Watson. That man, he's got a lot of stuff going on right now. I'll just say it at that. And he's not performing on the field whatsoever. But I think Dallas' defense is just insane this year. I mean, you look at their stat line for this Sunday, like a guy like Eric Kendricks, who came over from the Chargers, had 2 sacks. DeMarcus Lawrence had 2 sacks. Micah Parsons had a sack. There's third or fourth round pick from a year ago, Demarion Overshone. I think he was out all of last year due to an ACL. He came in, led the team in tackles, had a sack, had a TFL, 2 QB hits. Like, I think it's a combination of both. And if this Dallas defense plays like this, I'm not saying they will every week. Oh man, this is easily going to be the best defense in the league. And we didn't even talk about the fact that their offense kind of had like a subpar game, to say the least. Yeah. Like
that's like Dak didn't have necessarily an amazing game. He got the job done, really, for what he needed to do in that game. I think the score kind of skews a little bit of how good of a performance the offense has, because if you only have 179 passing yards and 102 rushing yards, and you have 33 points, good lord, that's impressive. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, didn't they had a kick return touchdown, or was it a punt return touchdown?
Yep,
they had one of them, punt return touchdown.
Yep. And so, this defense, good lord, I think Deshaun was sacked 5-6 times.
6.
And he just looked lost. Dude, it's time. I know you have to pay the guy. Just pay the guy and move on. It's really a waste of time, really, at this point.
Oh man. So where do you think Deshaun Watson's QBR ranked in week 1 quarterbacks? Where do you think it ranks?
I'm assuming he ranked dead last. There's no way anybody was worse than him. And if
so
there,
you
if
would
there
be
is,
do you want to take a guess of what his QBR was? Again, mind you, 50 is average.
15?
9.3.
Dude.
The next closest is Bryce Young and the Panthers. Keep in mind, Bryce Young and the Panthers got absolutely curb stomped 47-10 in their game against the Saints. And Watson still had somehow a worse game.
That dude, we're gonna get to that Bengals game, not Bengals game, the Panthers game in a couple minutes, and we won't talk a lot about it. But I just wanted to point out something. But dude, it's time, and I know it's hard. It's hard in this industry of the sports world for franchises to admit that they were wrong. They never want to admit that they were wrong in any moves or any draft picks or any signings or any tradings that they do. They want to always find a way to be like, see, this is why we made this move. There's not one thing from Deshaun Watson right now that is like, oh yeah, this move was warranted and the contract makes total sense now. There's also a lot of things that are going on off the field right now that are also, again, plaguing this franchise that historically has been really bad. So they're trying to find an image that's somewhat positive, and they can't do it with this guy under center. I get they may not like Jameis Winston. I think he's still on their roster. There was rumors about them trading him because of the moves or decisions they made with their final roster cuts. Put him in. He's got such a positive vibe compared to how the media and how everything with Deshaun Watson's career has panned out. that if you put Jameis Winston in, fans will automatically appreciate your franchise a little more, maybe even have a little more hope, because there's not one thing from Deshaun Watson's game from the last 2 years that we've seen that's like, oh yeah, this guy's going to lead the Browns to something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to add on top of that. I will say this, because I'm a cap. I love looking at financials and like salary caps and stuff like that. So his cap hit this year is just shy of 28 million, which isn't like terrible. But the next 2 years, 73 million, 73 million, and when he's not even on the team, it's 27 million.
And that's all guaranteed or what?
Fully guaranteed. So he's getting that money regardless if he gets cut. So that's where Cleveland's at right now. They can't like.
And you're telling me that he's going to do something.
Yeah, but I don't know. Cleveland's in a tough spot. I would not want to be a Browns fan right now. Just put it that way.
I'd rather be a Browns fan where you were switching quarterbacks every 2 weeks than being in this situation.
Yeah.
This is just really bad. And it's only going to get worse as long as he's under center. And again, I get that they have to pay the guy, but it's sometimes it's worth just paying the bill. Just pay the bill and get it over with. Because
yeah, but in this, I agree with you, but I don't, because the bill would be 170 million.
But if you know that you may win a little more with Jameis,
it's tough. I'll just say this: there's a reason I'm not a GM.
Yeah,
and that I won't even get close to that point, because I do agree with you. I would bite the bullet, but I think at the same time, I don't even know who their GM is. Oh man, but I think he would lose his job if they had to cut Watson. The amount of draft picks they had to give up, the contract they gave him, just for them to cut him 2 years later, I think that GM would lose his job. Well, as he should. I mean, that's a terrible decision.
Hypothetically, the Browns fall flat on their face, finish with a top 3 pick. They're not taking a quarterback.
No, they can't.
Even if they get the first overall pick, I don't think they're taking a quarterback. Until he's not on that roster, I don't think they're taking a quarterback.
It's crazy. The fall off to Deshaun Watson kind of reminds me of the fall off of Ben Simmons, but both have had their own issues. Not saying their issues are the same, but just
I get it.
The players that they were 2 or 3 years ago to what they are now, it's sad. It's sad to see. Because Watson was arguably a top 5 quarterback in the league. I know he led the league in passing yards one year. And to see him like this, it's sad. It's sad. It really is.
Yep. Switching over to his former team that is in a way better mood right now. Yeah. Every time he kind of struggles, I bet you they get a bigger and bigger smile, especially with the quarterback they got right now in CJ Stroud. 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a victory. 2-point victory, 29-27. Very interesting score. You don't normally see a 29-27 final score, I feel like. But very entertaining game. That was another one. So we were watching it on a laptop, so you can't do multi-stream on YouTube TV on laptops yet. Because I think it's because they don't want people streaming the streams, which kind of makes sense. So we opened 4 tabs and just kept switching through the 4 tabs while games were going on, which was fine. We made it work. And this was one of the games that we had basically on the whole time where we didn't switch the game. If it was on our TV, we were watching it. And a lot of it had to do with fantasy, honestly, with CJ Stroud being a quarterback that I have in one of the leagues, as well as Jonathan Taylor with people that I was watching the game with. But very good game. I'm probably my favorite game to watch this weekend. And dude, the Texans, they looked good, and the Colts did as well. I'll give the Colts the credit that they deserve. They played a decent game. But the combination of Joe Mixon, CJ Stroud, and that very young receiver core that now has a star in Stephon Diggs. I know some people may not consider him a star anymore, but when he's on his game, he is fun to watch. Had 2 touchdowns in week 1. And so they also, Nico Collins had 117 receiving yards in week 1 as well in that 2-point victory. I'm telling you right now, I think the Texans might be a team that's competing for a top spot in the AFC this year.
Yeah, they certainly have the right division to compete in a for one of the top spots in the AFC. Considering the AFC South it's not a great division. I mean, the
Isn't it?
Colts kept it close. The Titans they're going to tighten. They're just going to be a bottom feeder in that league. And then the Jags, who even knows what the Jags are doing anymore? They choked that
Isn't that
lead to
crazy though?
Miami. Yeah.
That how quickly teams can go from contenders to pretenders. And the
Oh yeah.
Jaguars, like we were talking, you and I, we've mentioned this
Yeah.
so many times this year already. How we both thought that Trevor Lawrence could be a quiet MVP candidate last season, and now not one person is even considering him in contention for that.
It's crazy what a year makes. But as someone who had Anthony Richardson in fantasy, this was good to see. Um, I will say this: his in stats are a little inflated. He had nine completions, 19 attempts, 212 yards for 2 touchdowns. Did throw a pick. It says his QBR is 87.5. I think it's because he only had so few completions that number skyrocketed. He did have one insane throw to Alec Pierce. Like that
I was
throw.
going to say he had a couple of them that were dropped
Right.
that could have been even bigger. So I think that we should be giving Richardson enough, like more flowers than maybe some people are giving him, because he actually performed really well. It's just the receivers dropped a couple of deep bombs. Maybe they were a little too far outreach from them, but I honestly really loved Anthony Richardson in his first showing in the season.
Yeah, and he had that clutch 4th and goal rushing
Mm-hmm.
touchdown that got the Colts back into the game where they just needed to get a stop, which they unfortunately did not. But I think this game more talks about the Texans. Texans played really well, obviously. You mentioned it already. I think Joe Mixon kind of showed the Bengals why they shouldn't have probably traded him. 30 carries and 160 yards basically for a touchdown, to add with 3 receptions for 19 yards. He played phenomenal. I don't expect him to keep this pace up. Obviously, he is an older running back. I think he's in his 7th or 8th year already. So, but if they can get half of this production, if they can get 80 yards a week from Joe Mixon, I still think that sets him up for success going forward. I don't know. I came out of this game thinking that the Colts they had some issues in that game, like you said, with some drops by some wide receivers, and they still looked really good. Like Richardson looked like he looked comfortable back there, and his ability to run the ball is always going to help out the Colts. And then the Texans are about what I thought they were going to be, a high-powered offense that can sometimes rely on their defense to get some stops. But yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite games of the week.
Yeah, I think both teams are going to be competing for the top of that division, potentially, depending on if the Colts can figure out a couple things. Outside of that, I think that the Texans, could be competing for a very, very good playoff seeding this year, especially because I think that the Bengals are not as good as some people are saying. So I think that they could jump the Bengals this year, and rankings-wise in the overall AFC, and especially that they're in a division where if they don't win the division, it will shock me. I'm not going to lie, even if I do say that the Colts could compete with them. But that's enough talking about that great division. Let's move over to another NFC North team. The highly anticipated debut of Caleb Williams in a Chicago Bears uniform. They got the W. And for some people, that's all that matters. However, this is not a performance. Real quick, I think Caleb Williams broke some streak of 15 straight first round quarterbacks losing their debut or whatever. Was it first overall? First overall, losing their debut. I think they were 0-14-1 was the record.
Shout out Kyler Murray for that one tie.
Yeah, shout out Kyler Murray. The last one to win was David Carr, Derek Carr's brother, I think. Right? They're brothers, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
First draft pick ever by the Houston Texans.
Good Lord. That shows you how young the Texans still are. That blows my mind. Back on this game, though, with the Titans and Bears, 24-17. Will Levis had an iffy game, had 2 interceptions. There's a photo of him going viral of him throwing a pick, and he's on his knees, like freaking out, like giving up on the play and everything. Caleb Williams, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 15 yards on the ground, 93 yards passing. On a rating from 0 being absolutely terrible, one of the worst debuts from a first overall pick I've ever seen, to 10 being the greatest. He's going to be the next Patrick Mahomes of this league. Where would you rank Caleb Williams' debut with the Bears?
See, I'm actually going to take a different approach to this. Since I'm a college student, I receive letter grades. I'm going to give him a letter grade on his performance.
That works.
I am Professor Livingston, and quarterback class is in session. Caleb Williams gets a D-. He gets a somewhat passing grade in some classes, but a failing grade in others. The sole fact that they won this game. That is the only reason why.
It would be an F if it was a...
It would be an F if they lost this game. Because you can't go out there, your first game ever, you're the most hyped up first pick we've had since, Trevor, or even if you want to go further back, Andrew Luck. Like, if you really want to go back that far, you can't go out there and go 14-29 for 93 yards and no touchdowns. Granted, he didn't throw the ball over, so there's a plus. He was able to keep the ball protected, which is always good as a quarterback. But he had one, I'm sure you saw it, but the sack where he took almost a 20 or 30 yard loss. They were in field goal range, which I don't remember if they had to punt that drive or if they had to kick the long field goal. But it kind of just punted their chances on getting the touchdown that drive. His quarterback rating was only a 23.5. I don't know how it was even that high to begin with. Passer rating of 55.7. Just didn't play well. Granted, it reminded me a lot of my Iowa Hawkeyes and the way they play.
Which is funny because
after this week,
Corey Taylor.
Yeah, I will always remember the quote of Caleb going up to Torrey like, "Hey, you're just not going to punt that often." As Torrey has 6 punts for 270 yards, and 3 of which were in the 20, and had a 60-yard punt.
He's my rookie of the year right now.
Punting is still winning, and it always will be.
I had the Bears defense on my fantasy team, so I had.
Yeah, I went up against the Bears defense. That was not fun.
it was very enjoyable. Yeah, I'd give it a D- as well. Nothing really stuck out to there. It's funny that his QBR is actually lower than Will Levis, who threw 2 picks, and so.
But Levis had a passing touchdown to Okonkwo in the back of the end zone, and had more yards.
Yeah,
even
and
if it was
again,
only by
it's
30.
the first regular season game for Caleb Williams, and honestly, it's first regular season game for a lot of Bears, offensive Bear players on that side of the ball because they added Keenan Allen. I mean, let's look at their stats here for receiving. DJ Moore had 36 yards.
It's not great.
Keenan Allen 29 yards. Roma Dudze only had 1 reception. Cole Kmet had 1 reception. So they have guys. They just need to get them the ball more. And the rushing attack was abysmal, let's be honest. DeAndre
Chicago
Swift,
still has some – they still have issues on the offensive line. That offensive line was looking rough. They were getting manhandled by that Tennessee front.
So I agree with your D- rating. We'll see what week 2 brings for the Bears. I mean,
do you see that week 2 game, though?
It's
against the
Texans, so it's not going to be easy for them whatsoever. I want to be. I'm not trying to overreact on a week 1. It's just, he got the win. He broke the streak of 15 straight non-winning first round overall picks in their debut. But I'm a little worried. I'm not going to lie, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Looking at the rest of the schedule, I mean, we mentioned the Steelers earlier. Defeating the Falcons team that a lot of people thought were going to hit the upswing on this year, especially on their offensive side, and they only scored 10 points, all 10 coming in the first half. You were one of those guys that was kind of hyping up their offense heading into this year, not necessarily trying to attack you, just kind of get
No,
your
you're right.
perspective on what you thought of the Falcons in week one. And honestly, is it kind of like the Bears where it's like a lot of new faces, kind of a new system as well with the new coaching staff? So is it time to panic already for Falcons fans, or is it pump the brakes?
I pump the brakes, but we'll see. The Falcons have a brutal schedule coming up. I think they play the Eagles on Monday night, then the Chiefs, and then they get kind of a layup. I say layup in the Saints, but they just beat a team by 37. If we consider Carolina a competent NFL franchise.
Hey, I told you 2 or 4 wins. That's all they're getting. Between 2 and 4, that's all the Panthers are getting this year.
We'll see. I wouldn't put too much stock into this game. Yeah, I know Kirk Cousins threw 2 picks, but year in and year out, the Steelers defense is one of the best in the league. Anytime you got guys like Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt, and Minka Fitzpatrick, you're always going to have a really good defense. So I wouldn't put that much stock into the Falcons dropping this one. I will say, having your best receiver only have 2 catches for 15 yards is a little alarming. And having Bijan have 18 carries for 68 yards, only 3.8 yards a carry, also alarming. But I think it's part of it. First game out there with a lot of new guys. I think the other part of it was they happened to play a team that has had a really good defense for the last decade in the NFL, or at least since I started watching football. It seems like the Steelers have always had a crazy defense, whether it was James Harrison, whether it was Cam Hayward, whether it's TJ Watt. Like, they've always had a crazy front seven. So,
do you think Justin Fields has deserved his starting spot for the next couple weeks?
We'll see. I mean, obviously, I'm always super key on quarterbacks not turning the ball over. I think that's how you keep your job, and I think that's how you lose jobs, is by turning the ball over. He went 17 to 23, so he was fairly efficient passing the ball. Didn't have any crazy downfield plays though. Quarterback rating of 42.6, which is slightly below average, which, watching the game in real time, I could kind of see why the rating says that. Also had 14 rushes for 57 yards. We'll see. We'll see how long Russell Wilson has this injury. I don't know his exact injury, like the title of it. Is it his calf?
I honestly don't remember. Let me look.
Let me see. What is it? What injury is it?
I think it's calf.
I think, yeah. So,
and it sounds like Justin Fields is going to start again this week,
which
against the Broncos.
I mean, if you're Justin Fields, if you want to get your confidence up, your next 2 opponents, really. I know the Chargers won on Sunday, but I still don't think that, and I think you could agree with me, I don't think the Chargers are world beaters yet. So I think that's a winnable game, especially with how talented the Steelers roster is. So you could potentially be going into that game against the Colts, maybe 2-1, 3-0. But at the end of the day,
watch out for the Steelers, man. I said it.
Yeah. They are just annoyingly good every single year. Even when they had Kenny Pickett last year.
Annoyingly good.
Yep.
Really? Coming from a Hawk fan. Okay.
Well, I was annoyingly good too, but they sometimes just disappoint you enough where it hurts. AKA Saturday. Regardless, I don't think Fields did anything to lose his job. I don't think he did anything to really solidify it either, if that makes sense. I think he did enough where Steelers fans are like, okay, you led us to a win. Let's get some touchdowns on the board next time. But I think he played fairly well.
Let's kind of run through quick for the rest of the games that happened during the noon hour. Bills, Cardinals. Cardinals blew the lead. There really is no explanation for that. Marvin Harrison, I think, only had 1 reception. Final score of that was 34-28 for the Bills. Any final thoughts on that one?
I remember watching the end of that game and Kyler Murray missing Marvin Harrison wide open down the field on that 3rd down. Other than that, Cardinals played a lot better than I thought.
I agree. It's just disappointing that they do that every freaking year on week 1. We talked about the Panthers a little bit. 47-10 loss against the Saints. Derek Carr, 3 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara kind of looked like his old self as well. Saints, I think it's more about the Panthers being bad than the Saints being good.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't fall for the trap.
Oh, I'm not.
The Saints always do this to one team. It's like, oh, Derek Carr, is he
I
sneaky
think they
good?
did it
No.
to the Packers, I think, once or twice in the last 3 years.
Right.
So
Don't fall for the trap.
don't fall for it. What about this trap? 28-6 final score for the Vikings Giants. Sam Darnold 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Aaron Jones had 94 yards in his debut as a Viking. Vikings have a decent team, or the Giants really, really, really bad?
Giants are really, 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 really bad. Daniel Jones likes throwing it to the other team more than he likes throwing it to his own team. We'll say this: Vikings did look somewhat impressive. What did the stat out there? Sam Darnold completed his first 11 or 12 passes as a Viking. He looked okay out there. Like, again, I don't think they're going to be a playoff team, but having a QBR of 81 in week 1 is always going to help. And Aaron Jones looked good. So
I will say playing against the Giants when you're trying to figure out who your quarterback's going to be after losing McCarthy to that injury is kind of a blessing in disguise.
Oh, yeah. Not even disguise. That's just a blessing.
Yeah, for sure. Dolphins come out with a 3-point win against the Jaguars, 20-17. Tyreek Hill, 7 receptions, 130 yards, 1 touchdown. Tua also had 338 passing yards. Good win by the Dolphins. Kicker made up for it for a very, very bad shank. I don't know if you saw that one. That was really bad. Maybe one of the worst kicks I've ever seen.
Yeah, Tennessee. Jacksonville had this game. They were up 17-3, I think, with like just over 2 or 3 minutes left in the third. But whenever you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you're gonna have wide open plays happen. And Tua was able to deliver it to him. I think he was the leading passer this week in yards, 338. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Dolphins looked really good. I think Miami's still gonna be a team that we all have to watch out for. I know they're like. I always give them crap because they can't play in the cold and they can't play on the road. But I think this year's a little bit different. I like some of the additions they made on their defense, so I think it was a good win for Miami.
And they got a lot of options at running back, so kind of a great thing to kind of have when you have a little. It's better to have a wide range where you have a lot of decent running backs versus having one really good one, but if that one gets hurt, you are in trouble. So, other games, Chargers 22, Raiders 10. I don't have anything major to talk about this. Good game by Dobbins, though, 135 yards and 1 touchdown on the ground. So I will say, though, Joe Alt played really well against Crosby.
I don't think he gave up pressure.
And so maybe going to be – can you give offensive lineman rookie of the year?
I don't know if you can, but if you could, I think this – if he keeps this up, I think you could have a very real case to say that.
But outside of that, Chargers played a decent game. I don't think it's a sign of anything good to come from them, honestly, because the Raiders are still kind of with Gardner Minshew being their starting quarterback, I don't think they're going to really be anything. Seahawks come out with a 6-point a win against the Broncos, 26-20. Any thoughts on that game?
Nix didn't play that well. That's all I'm going to say. 138 yards, 2 picks, QBR 31. Just didn't look that good. He had the rushing touchdown, which kind of made up for it. And I'm not putting too much stock in Seattle either. I mean, Seattle played a team that's probably going to finish top 5 in the NFL draft. So,
and then rounding out the afternoon games, the Buccaneers come out with a big win. My opinion, a big win because Baker Mayfield played really well. 4 touchdowns through the air, 289 yards, 37-20 was the final score against the Commanders. I'm telling you, man, Tampa Bay I think they got something special down there in the offensive side.
Oh yeah, Baker definitely. I think it's one of the better games I've seen out of Baker. That when Red Zone was panning over to that game, Chris Godwin looked really good. Mike Evans is always going to be really good and has been. I mean, knock on wood, he's at 1,000 yards every single year. I think that's going to continue. And then their rookie receiver Jalen McMillan from Washington had a pretty nice touchdown for him. So I still like what Washington has got going for him, but
yep,
I don't know. Tampa Bay looked really dominant in this game.
It's hard to go up against a really good offense week 1, especially when you have a new head coach and everything. But I'm not going to give up on the Commanders this early. I think they have a good foundation for a bright future. The night game on Sunday night was a very good one. 26-20 was the final score. The Lions are able to come out on top in overtime against the Rams. David Montgomery kind of capping off. Well, not capping off, because Brock Purdy ended up having a decent game. Didn't have a touchdown on Monday, but a decent game for capping off a very cyclone-heavy weekend in the world of sports. But what were your thoughts on the Rams and Lions game?
Yeah, Puka Nacua going down is really going to hurt the Rams. I think he's out at least 4 weeks. That's
Why
going to
is
suck.
it that, like, Cooper Kupp gets hurt, and then we discover Puka Nacua, and it's like, oh my gosh, if these two are healthy together, this offense is going to be so fun to watch, and they just can't stay healthy, like, to save their life. I swear he's going to come back whenever he comes back, and then Cooper Kupp's going to get hurt a week or two before that.
Right, and I still like some of the other receivers that the Rams got. Tyler Johnson looked pretty good in their game on Sunday. He had 5 catches for almost 80 yards. Former Kansas City Chief Demarcus Robinson looked pretty good. He had 4 catches for 42 yards. That was one of the more fun games of the week, especially as someone who had David Montgomery in fantasy. Watching him dominate that overtime drive was very nice for my fantasy squad, so appreciate it, Montgomery.
Him and Gibbs together might be the best running back duo in the NFL.
Oh yeah, I would easily agree with that.
But I will say, I was expecting the Lions to actually kind of blow this one out of the water. Like, it's not supposed to be close, because I haven't been high on the Rams. But Stafford kind of showing that he still has a little bit of something. 317 yards, did throw a pick, but not a bad performance for him and the Rams. We'll see what him and that offense look like with Nacua out, but a decent performance, not going to lie. I'll give them their flowers when I kind of have been crapping on them the last couple weeks. Finally, on Monday, capping it off with the debut of Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. They fall to the 49ers 32-19, and kind of not headlined by anybody that we kind of expected. Christian McCaffrey was announced out of nowhere. I mean, he was questionable all week, but it was kind of announced out of nowhere that he wouldn't be playing in that game. And you mentioned a lot of fantasy football owners kind of not happy about that. I think a lot of them actually lost their matchups because he didn't play. I think the few leagues that I'm in, every single one of those, if they had McCaffrey, they lost, and they would have won assuming McCaffrey would have gotten what his average usually is in fantasy football. But Jordan Mason, great game, 28 carries, 147 yards, 1 touchdown, averaged 5 yards per carry, which is really good for someone that I think he was undrafted, if I remember correctly. So,
yep,
great performance by Jordan Mason.
Yeah, they were saying on the broadcast it's the most yards he's had in a game since high school. That's crazy. That he didn't even have this many yards at, I think, Georgia Tech. Yeah, Georgia Tech. Rodgers didn't play terrible. I thought when the Jets line decided to block, that Rodgers had some good weapons, had time to throw. Lazard, out of nowhere, kind of had a crazy good game. We haven't really heard anything from Allen Lazard in 2 years. So
see what happens when Rodgers is healthy. Lazard and him just have that connection.
Right. It looked like Packers Lazard all over again, because last year, correct me if I'm wrong, I didn't watch that many Jets games, but I don't remember.
Not many did.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't remember Lazard doing much of anything.
No.
Breece Hall did good. Breece Hall had a bunch of touches. But in the end, the Jets defense was gassed. I think the Niners had almost 39 minutes time of possession, or 38 minutes, and the Jets only had 21. So defense was gassed by the end of it. But I still like what the Jets did. They definitely impressed me. Yeah, I'm higher on the Jets now than I were 48 hours ago.
Don't blame you. We're getting close to wrapping up this episode. Any final thoughts from week 1 before we kind of preview week 2 quickly?
No, I think if you were to ask for what a great or a perfect week 1 was, I think this is about as close as you're going to get.
I completely agree. The Thursday, Friday night games were great. There were some close games in the afternoons. The noon slate, as well as the afternoon slate. And then the 2 primetime games the end of the week on Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football were really good to watch as well. So week 1 is in the books. Week 2 starts off with another Thursday night game between the Bills and the Dolphins in Miami. Obviously, both teams coming off of a win, both teams coming off of close wins, coming down to this final stretch. Do you have really a favorite in that game? I think because it's in Miami and Miami I feel like they're rolling a little bit. They have a little more motivation. I think a lot of that has to be with the team coming together with stuff that happened off the field before the game on Sunday. But I feel that the Dolphins will win actually by a couple touchdowns in this one. And a lot of that has to do with, I think that they have better chemistry right now, as well as what the Bills did against Arizona, while being impressive, still concerns me a little bit because it is Arizona. You were at home week 1, and there's no reason that you should have had to come back against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I think my early dog would be Buffalo. Yeah, I remember what they did in Week 18 last year against the Dolphins. They kind of manhandled them in the second half. So just off of that premise, I know Buffalo lost a lot in the offseason, but they looked okay to me in the second half. Hopefully they can get Dalton Kincaid more involved. Keon Coleman looked good in the few touches he had, but I think I'd probably slightly lean towards Buffalo this game.
I respect that. Any other games from this week that you're kind of looking at? Obviously, Sunday Night Football. I think this is a really interesting Sunday Night Football, and I think it might actually get ugly. The Texans host the Bears. If the Bears defense can show up, Bears defense / special teams, because it wasn't just their defense. They were able to block punts as well. If they're able to show up, this might be a game. I still think that the Texans are going to be able to pull out on this one with the W. And hopefully Caleb Williams can make some noise, because after week 1, that's a little concerning of a look for who was supposed to be, like you mentioned, one of the most hyped quarterbacks since Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck.
Yeah, that is going to be a great game. It might, hopefully it's not a bloodbath. Like, hopefully that we get a close Sunday night game. But you never know after how the Bears looked on Sunday, I don't really know what to trust or believe. I'll tell you what, one game I'm super forward to, it's a noon game. Buccaneers-Lions, holy points. Like, that is going to be, I'll go out on a limb, that's going to be the highest scoring game of the week. The Bucs offense looked really well. Even though the Lions didn't look like the Lions of last year with their offense only scoring 20 in regulation and then eventually the last touchdown in overtime, they still showed flashes. Like Jamison Williams had an unbelievable touchdown down the field. Obviously Baker threw 4. Like, I think that's going to be one of the games to watch. As well as, looking at this, the Monday night game too is going to be really good. Falcons-Eagles.
Yep.
The Falcons, I wouldn't say that's a must-win for them, but you don't want to get smoked in this game if you lose. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I'm looking at this slate. There's some good games to keep an eye out for. Steelers-Broncos, I think, actually will be a good one just because it's in Denver. We'll see if that actually holds true. Obviously, a lot of people will be tuning into that Chiefs-Bengals game no matter what the situation is. It's kind of a rivalry, depending on how you look at it. Something that I found interesting, this is according to ESPN bet, but Arizona is favored by 1.5 against the Los Angeles Rams, which I think a lot of that has to do with the loss of Nakua, but still, that's something to keep an eye on for when you're heading into the weekend on who you think might win some of these games. That's really interesting to see. I'm not going to lie. That one shocked me when looking at the schedule.
Yeah, that one's good. You know which one I'm probably not going to tune into? It's Browns-Jags. That one I probably won't tune into. That is the Chargers and Panthers. Like that one.
I was going to say, Chargers and Panthers game, I won't watch a minute of. I guarantee you I won't watch a minute of. The only reason I watched a minute of the Saints-Panthers game from last weekend is because I have Kamara on my fantasy team. So I was kind of interested to see if you'd actually get a touchdown because he was playing really well. Just needed that touchdown to get over what I needed in points. But other games I don't think I'm going to tune in the Saints-Cowboys. Honestly, there's some really good matchups, and then there are some, I think, blowouts potentially in the making this week. But
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
when blowouts are predicted, they're actually closer than you think.
I was gonna say,
Bengals.
look at last week. But
Yeah. Any other thoughts before we sign off here?
no, I mean it is so good that we're back in the NFL season. We're already in week 3 of college football, which is fun. The NBA is around the corner. Baseball's getting ready to like this for me is the best time of year for
Oh yeah.
sports. I know people love March Madness, but I don't really watch a whole lot of baseball. I have been more this year. But I love
October hits,
watching
I watch all of it.
postseason baseball, especially with my Royals as of right now having a spot in the wild card. So we'll see. I think they're slated to play the Orioles if it were to end today, which don't like. Orioles are really good. But you even got hockey if you got any hockey fans out there. Hockey's getting ready to start up. So it's one of the best times of the year for sports. So I'm really excited.
Before we go, I have one more thing. One sec.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Oh no.
I had to bring this home with me from Iowa City, just to let you know. I just had to bring it home, you know. I just felt like it looks better in Ames, you know.
Yeah. Oh man. I will say this: Iowa has a 0 win percentage when Kirk Ferentz is on the sidelines this year. Just saying. Not saying I want Kirk gone, but that's a real stat.
I had to. I forgot I had this in my room, and I was like, oh yeah, I got to bring this on the show, you know.
Man,
Rubbin, I got the
yeah,
boy back.
Fair enough. You guys earned it. That field goal at the end was insane. I didn't know what to say after that.
Yeah. Well, what was the stat? Because we didn't play in 2020.
Iowa hasn't won a home game in the Cyhawk series since 2018, which ironically enough is the last game that me and you both went to for a Cyhawk game. We both were in Kinnick Stadium that year.
Oh yeah, you guys. Yeah, Kyle Kemp got hurt early on in that one.
That was like a 10-7 or 13-10 score.
Another one of those Cyhawk games that is not memorable whatsoever.
No, now I got to pull this up.
I went in 2022 when we won off of the you guys. Well, we almost pulled the most Iowa State move ever by having all those penalties put you guys in field goal range.
Yes.
And then I was debating on whether or not I wanted to go this year, and I ended up not going. And after the game ended, I was like, I'm kind of happy I didn't go, because that would have been more of a toxic environment to be an Iowa State fan in than Iowa State already winning and then almost blowing it and then still winning that game.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It was not ideal to be an Iowa City as an Iowa fan with surrounded by Iowa State fans going crazy. Not ideal, but
the thing that all Iowa State fans have complained about over the years is that Iowa State tries to play too much like Iowa, which is reason why they haven't won many of those Cyhawk games. And the few plays that they ran on offense last Saturday that got them some of those points, some of those good possessions, they didn't play Iowa football. And that's how they got over that hump. By the way, Higgins being able to rip that interception out of your guys' hands. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen that photo. That photo is...
I have. I've seen it by every Iowa State fan on Twitter. Trust me. Trust me. It's been rough the last day or two.
It's all right. You guys will beat us in wrestling.
No, we're not. I can't even say we're gonna beat you in basketball because you guys are ranked like top 5 in basketball. And Fran, I don't even know what Fran's doing in basketball, dude.
I think
women's basketball. We'll get you in women's basketball.
You sure?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We got a transfer from Villanova that averaged 25 a game.
We got Adi.
We got Hannah Stolke still. We'll see. Basketball season's...
Dude,
that game's already, 3 months away, which is crazy that we're already that close.
I'm not trying to... This is a lot of bias, obviously, but I'm like, I don't think you understand what's coming from Iowa State women this year. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I don't think some people realize how.
To be fair, you watch a lot. You're way closer to Iowa State women's basketball than I am to Iowa women's basketball, because you're at every home game, correct?
I work pretty much every home game. So
Yeah,
I
I was
see
gonna
a lot
say.
of pretty much the entire starting five's back. Got a transfer from Marquette who can shoot the ball like nothing else. Got someone from Oregon State who can shoot the ball. Basically, what they did, they're like, we didn't shoot the ball necessarily as well as Iowa State usually does from 3-point range because, Iowa State women's basketball is pretty much known for shooting threes. That's it. But last year, they kind of did a lot more post game. So they went crazy with the transfer portal and recruits and getting all 3-point shooters. So I think they might have a little too much depth. We'll see. I'm really excited for them. But no, I don't know. I'm not saying Iowa's going to be bad. I just think Iowa State women are going to be that good.
I will say the fact that the SIAC basketball game is in Carver this year, I think makes for a great. Even though you guys will probably end up smoking us by 20 or 30, it makes it a little bit competitive because Iowa State going on the road. But I will promise you this: I will be at that game attending, rooting for my Hawkeyes.
When's the last time you guys beaten us in Hilton? I know it's recently.
Year before COVID.
Was that it?
I was at the 2021 one with you, where we got smoked and Jordan Bohannon was talking crap.
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah.
68-84. That was when
that was Bohannon when he left the shoes on half court because he thought that was it.
That.
And then proceeded to play 2 more years of college basketball.
And then you came with me to that 2021 game where it was 73-53 was the final. These games have not been close recently. Good Lord.
No, because even the 2022, the one that was last in Carver, Iowa started the game off like 20-0.
Yep. And then Iowa State won 90-65 last year. Good Lord.
Yeah, that one was rough.
We need a good one. We need like a
when's the last close one been?
What do you consider close?
Within 10 points.
84-78 in 2017. Iowa State won that one. Outside of that, would be 2015, 83-82, and I think that's when Monte made that.
Nope, I don't want to talk about that one. I know exactly how that one went.
Which is funny because Iowa State was in the same exact situation the following game against Drake, and they ran the same exact play, and it didn't work. So we ended up beating Iowa off of that play and then losing the Drake off of the same play. But that's pretty much all we got for the sports nerds. Sometimes we go off on a little bit of Cyhawk tangent, and especially after last weekend, we got to do that. And shout out everybody who loves living in the Cyclone State, and we're going to keep living in the Cyclone State for years to come, hopefully. But enjoy the games this weekend. There's some good ones on the schedule, some not so good ones, but enjoy the very good, highly anticipated matchup like Buccaneers, Lions. Vikings, 49ers might be a good one. Chiefs, Bengals, and then the primetime games: Eagles, Falcons, Bears, Texans, and others. For Dawson Livingston, I'm Brock Bierman. We are the Sports Nerds. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms at 515 Podcasts, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. We live stream everything on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Make sure to follow, like, subscribe, leave a comment, give us suggestions on things you guys want us to talk about if you think of something throughout the week. I will be live with Chase. We're going to record our episode tonight. I think we might go live either Wednesday or Thursday because one of our games of the week is actually a Friday night matchup, which we'll get into when you tune into that. So for Dawson Livingston, I'm Brock Bierman. We'll see you guys next week. Enjoy the games.